Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Reflect, Reshape, Respond, Designing Your Lifestyle to the New Normal webinar. My name is Mel, and I'm an events coordinator here at CMI. I will shortly be handing over to Emily West and Lawrence Knott, who will be running the session today. Just a reminder, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right of your screen, and we shall answer as many as we can. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later on today. Now over to Emily and Lawrence to begin.
Thanks so much, Mel. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this moment for you to just pause and reflect on your lockdown experience. We're very honoured that you've joined us to take this time out. I'm Emily West. I'm a coach and a fellow member of the CMI. And before I was a coach, I had a long career in investment banking, and I ultimately ended up as head of leadership for an investment bank. And then I set up my own business. So I have had a few years' experience of working for myself, working from home, and yet still lockdown has impacted me in so many ways, as I'm sure it has for all of you. And so it's just so important that we just take some time out to reflect on that experience and then use that to inform us in our decisions in how we run our lives going forward. Now, I'm going to hand over shortly to Lawrence to introduce himself, but Lawrence and I work together frequently, and we run a series of workshops called the Conscious Living series. And they're all about bringing awareness to our lives. And both of us as coaches, we see huge value with our clients and ourselves in our own practices with ourselves in stopping and reflecting and then bringing that awareness to a certain part of our lives. And what happened was, as we were working together as coaches, we said, we want to bring these tools to everybody. So you don't just have to have a coach. Anything that we're teaching you, you could just do this on your own. So we designed the Conscious Living series to share some of the tools and the exercises that coaches do with their clients with as many people as possible, so you can bring that awareness to your own life. And so in today's session, and we'll talk about it more in a minute, in today's session, we're really bringing you the tool of reflection and how important it is to reflect on your experience. And then once you've reflected, that's great. But what do you do with that reflection so that you can actually impact and influence your life moving forward? Now, obviously, we've gone through this very strange experience of lockdown, and it has made a lot of us change our lives in unexpected ways that we probably wouldn't have done if we were left to our own devices. So how do we reflect and use that to then design our lives for a new normal, to really take control and shape our lives in a way that we want to? So Lawrence, I'll let you introduce yourself first before I share what we're going to actually cover in this webinar.
Hi, yes, I'm Lawrence Knott. I'm a coach. My first career actually was in local government, doing a lot of work in the community. I was a town planner, working with communities. And over the years, I started more and more working with businesses, business support, doing a lot of research, really getting to know people and understand them under the skin. So in the end, I had retrained as a coach. And now I work with organizations, I work with leaders, business owners, but I also don't just do organizational work. I work one-to-one with leaders, but I also teach resilience and wellbeing programs. I've also got a history of working as a cognitive hypnotherapist and have worked in St. Lucia at the Body Holiday Resort, where the weather is pretty much like it is in the UK today.
But every day.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, it's been great working with Emily on the Conscious Living series, because that's a kind of a mantra for all my work. Bring some awareness to your life situation or a specific situation. And it's fairly easy to do that when we take that step back and just ask ourselves some simple questions. So really looking forward to this.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you so much for joining us for this. So what are we going to cover in today's session? So it's all about reflecting, reshaping, responding. But what are we going to talk about specifically? Well, the benefits and value of taking time to reflect, and really why you should incorporate that into your life on a regular basis. But also how reflection can be that powerful tool for creating change. It's not just about reflecting and then just thinking that's interesting. Actually, reflection allows you to make incredible changes in your life from a really informed position. So you're going to get an insight into your own life and how you've adapted. Now, we have a limited amount of time, so we won't be able to go as deep as we would normally with our clients. But what we have done is we have put together some extra questions, some extra worksheets, and Mel's going to circulate that with everyone who signed up afterwards. So we will give you some questions that you can take away and go a little bit deeper into that insight into your life. We'll then talk about how small changes can make a big difference in your life. And we'll finish with some practical tools for experimenting going forward. And I won't I won't say more than that on the experimenting part. I'll let Lawrence cover it, but it's experimenting in life is actually another great thing to do to be able to make fantastic changes for yourself. So Lawrence, let me hand over to you for part one.
Yes. And one thing I would say, you know, we came up with this 3-part element, this aspect of reflection. So for those of you watching right now, the thing I'd say to you, how many apps do you have running right now? Whether it's on your desktop, you're on your phone, I'm talking about the mental apps. So it's great that you're here right now, but use this opportunity. And, you know, when I basically go for a reflective kind of session for myself, I want to basically get rid of the extraneous triggers, what's going on out there, just to bring some quiet. Why? Because I need space for reflection, because reflection is going to bring me insight, but I need to have enough room for that insight to happen. So cast your mind back right now, because I think we get so much on the hamster wheel of life. You know, this whole situation has taken us out of automatic. We're talking about our habits, our habitual ways of living. It's been forced upon us, but at the same time, we have adjusted and adopted. But cast your mind back to mid-March and remember how quickly things changed. And just, we put these questions here. As Emily mentioned, there are some deeper dive questions if for those who want to sort of really get into this and take a step back on their lives. But look at these 3 simple questions right now. So if you've got pen and paper, you want to jot something down or just make a note. Think about what the upside has been for you. You know, what's been different that you've really enjoyed? I know a number of people have said to me, it's like, well, I've enjoyed 3 hours of not commuting every day. Can I please never go back to the office? Yes, there's some downsides to that, but that's been a really common one. But yeah, what has been different that you have really enjoyed? Maybe it was something that was, you know, from outside that happened, or maybe you made an adjustment in your own life. And the second question, the flip side to that, what's been the downside? What have you missed that you would like to have back, or maybe you're looking to have back ASAP? And this, the reason we ask this question, because I think sometimes our habits of thinking, oh, I really miss going shopping, or I really missing going out for drinks 3 or 4 times a week. Well, actually, but that's just your habits. So for me, you know, I've missed getting together with friends. I do a lot of supper clubs, a lot of get-togethers. I've really missed that, and I want that back. Well, I can't have it back just yet. But, you know, from my point of view, it's that, well, but that's because I value that human contact, being close with people, good conversation. And obviously, in the meantime, I've adopted different strategies to maybe meet those deeper needs. And then the question that gets you really going deeper, you know, what's been removed that you don't want back? Thank you very much. So, for example, the 3-hour commute. You know, we've all basically, it feels like now, and this is really, you know, out there has taken away our freedom, our routines. But take a pause right now, because maybe you've made some different choices over the last few months where I don't want to do it that way anymore. Don't just go back to old normal, create a new normal. So Emily, what has been removed that you don't want back in your life?
Well, a few things I have to say. I don't normally commute a lot because I work for myself, but definitely going into central London for business meetings. Think about that's like a 1-hour meeting, but that's probably an hour on the tube each way. I really don't miss being on the tube. Anyone who's joining us from London will be saying amen to not missing the commute, not missing the tube. What's been removed? My social schedule kind of went a bit up and down. It went very busy at first because I was trying to connect with everybody and stay close and check in with friends and family. And now it's got to a much nicer rhythm that's not as chaotic as it was before lockdown. I'm a very sociable person like Lawrence. And I'm one of those people, I don't know if you have this experience when you're listening, I kind of say yes to every invitation. And then when I've got to Thursday and I'm exhausted, I think, why did I do that? So what's been removed is an over busy schedule and commuting. And I love seeing people, but I don't want it back. I don't want that pace back. Now, there's other things that I found with my clients, and Lawrence, I don't know if you've found this too. When I've asked my clients what they've missed, they don't want back. A lot of them have found being around negative people, maybe people that they worked with or socialized with on automatic because they were nearby. And now that they've done everything remotely, you can have a bit more, in a way, control about who you talk to. And so think about that for yourself. Is that not just has there been anything or any habits, but has there been anybody that's been a bit removed from your life, and actually you think, no, that's been healthy for me to remove that. And then also there's habits. So some people have cut down on their drinking quite a lot because they're not going out as much, and they feel a lot better, and they're a bit worried actually when they go back that they'll fall back into that trap, but they'd like to keep it out.
Absolutely. And, you know, I'd add to that really. And on that theme, Emily, is that idea that somebody mentioned to me is like that FOMO, that fear of missing out related to saying yes.
Yeah.
When that's been taken away. So a few people have said it's like, oh, it's been nice to have some inner quiet, to have that space to be able to do, you know, more of a meditative practice, less going out, more self-care. And absolutely. But the thing I'd like, you know, I'm sure there's maybe some people with psychology degrees. We talk about where's our control?
Yeah.
External locus of control. If your locus of control, your well-being, everything is out there. Basically, what lockdown has done, because that's based on a belief, it's like, well, it's okay, it's out there. But if you have a strong level of external locus of control, as we adopt some kind of new normal, you could find yourself easily slipping back into those old habits.
Absolutely.
Whereas on the flip side, and the general, you know, agreement is, well, having a greater level of internal locus of control gives us more sense of control of our own decision making, to make the decisions and live the healthy lifestyle that we want. We're not at the mercy of out there society, routine, structure, what is expected of us. So that's the little warning sign, I think. If you do find yourself having a strong level of external locus of control, well, things have been removed that maybe you don't want back. Maybe you've got more power and choice than you realize.
Absolutely. So thank you, Lawrence. Let's just take that a little bit deeper then. And as coaches, when we coach people, regardless of whether we've been in lockdown or not, we use this wheel of life, this structure, to help people reflect in the different areas. And so we want you to start reflecting on those areas now in this session. What's been the impact of lockdown on your relationships? Has it improved them? Has it made them harder? Have you had the challenge of suddenly being around your other half 24/7, which is a challenge? You know, how have your relationships changed since lockdown? And then work and career. It's interesting what Lawrence was just saying about control. Some people feel a bit more in control around their work, and some people feel a bit less in control about their work now that they're working from home. But what has been the impact? Have you been able to be more effective or less effective? As a manager and a leader, has it improved your communication and connection with your team? I was coaching someone recently who said, I suddenly got it. I realized I really needed to reach out and find out how my team were doing, and not just assume. You know, in the office, you see them every day, so you assume you know how they are. And they said, it's really helped me connect, and I've become a better manager because of this experience. So what's impacted your work and career? Have you become more productive? Have you become more effective? Have you found it more difficult to work from home? So just think about each area. And health and wellbeing, and that was the last CMI webinar that I did, and you can watch that all on YouTube again. We talked all about health and wellbeing and what's the impact. Actually, have you found at first you missed the gym if you had a gym subscription, but now you really enjoyed working out from home, working outside, you know, going to the park to exercise? What's happened with your diet? Have you got healthier? Have you fallen into some unhealthy habits? Just what has been the impact? If you just thought about it, is my health better now, or is it worse than when lockdown started? And then leisure and interest. You know, what do we do in our free time? And I know some of you will say, Emily, what free time? I have a job and kids. I have no free time. But we need to carve time out for ourselves. So what do you normally do in your leisure time? And has that changed since lockdown? Have you taken up a new hobby that you've really enjoyed? Have you spent less time doing another hobby, and did you miss it, so you want it back? Or actually, you didn't miss it and you're quite happy to let it go. So what have you been doing? Have you been creative? Have you been painting? Have you been singing? Have you been expressing yourself in a creative way? And has that improved or worsened for you since lockdown started? And then the final part of the wheel is impact and purpose. And this is a very interesting part for myself and Lawrence, because we have found with our own clients, and you may have found this for yourself, that people have started becoming more aware of their impact on the environment, on the people around them, on their community. So some people who've never really thought about this have started to connect with this. And purpose can just be your meaning. You know, do you find meaning in your work? Do you find purpose as a manager in developing and mentoring people? Certainly when I ran a team, I found enormous purpose in helping develop others and bring them up the ladder in careers. So what's your impact? What's your purpose? What kind of impact have you had on your environment, on the people around you? Have you been more engaged in your local community? Have you been more aware of your environmental impact? Has that made you change things? For example, I'm buying a lot more food locally from local stores to support them, but I also realize that when I do that, there's no plastic packaging. So has lockdown made you tune into your impact, and has it changed how you behave because you're aware of that impact? So this is just a really nice model to use periodically, whether we're in lockdown or not, to just stop and assess and say, how has this situation, whatever it is, impacted these areas? And where am I in these areas? Is there one area where I think I really need to work on that? Or is there one area where you think, oh, that's going really well, actually. I'm very happy with how that is. I don't need to change it. So let's just get you to focus on some specific questions that we can then use as we move forward with the exercises today. We've looked at how has lockdown impacted these different dimensions. So just stop for a second now and just try and think of which ones of these has been positively impacted. And maybe relationships, you might just think of a specific relationship. Maybe your relationship with your family has improved. Maybe your relationship has worsened. But just think about this for a second. Which area has been positively impacted by the changes that happen with lockdown? So just note that down, or just note that down in your head. And now let's answer the question, which has deteriorated? You might say, well, a few. Well, then which has been the most challenging? Which have you struggled with? Some people, it's been working career. They find working from home very difficult. One of my neighbors said, I just need to work with people in person. I find it very hard to do that remotely. Some people, it's that they've stopped making time for their hobbies because they've just been caught in this kind of frenetic cycle of just responding to the environment and what's happening around them, responding to the crisis, and they've lost their me time. So which area has been most challenging for you? Just answer that question with yourself. You don't have to share it, so you can just be very honest with yourself about it. So now we can get even deeper. And as I said, in the handout, we go a whole other level below this. And we highly recommend you take that handout, you print it out, you go and sit somewhere quiet, and you take an extra hour after this to really reflect and answer those questions. But as you reflect on the area that was most negatively impacted, which area did you find most challenging? Then let's start with just 3 small changes that could improve in that area. And all too often we see that when someone's not happy with something in their life, they kind of let it run until they get unhappy with it. And then they think, oh, I have to make a massive change. So I always think with health and well-being, because I'm also a nutritional therapist and I help people make healthy habits. And someone might suddenly get frustrated and say, oh, well, with lockdown, I've gained weight. I mean, who hasn't? I've definitely gained weight. Even if you exercise every day, you're just not doing your steps in the same way. So say you get frustrated by that. It's all too easy to then suddenly say, right, I'm going to do this crazy physical challenge. I'm going to work out for an hour a day. I'm going to follow this rigid diet. We've all done it, and you don't stick to it. And then you feel like a failure. And we want to encourage you that if there's an area of your life, once you've reflected and you've realized that isn't working for me, you can reshape it by just making small changes. And that's actually much kinder to yourself and much more manageable. But those small changes, they build up, they build up, they build up. And suddenly you've made really significant changes. So for example, if you've not been eating as well as you should, not been exercising as well as you should, can you just set aside a bit of time every Sunday to just sit down and plan your food for the week? That makes it much more likely. Can you just go out to the supermarket and buy a load of healthy snacks and just set up a snack box in your house? So that when you're really hungry between meetings, and it happens to us, and you don't have time to make a healthy meal, can you just grab a healthy snack because it's there, it's easy? To get yourself exercising, can you buddy up with someone? So this week, my partner and I both said we want to get on a health kick. So we're kind of accountability partners with each other this week, and we have to make each other exercise first thing. I can tell you, went really well this morning. We've already been for a run. But what will help you stick to that change? Or can you reward yourself? Can you gamify it by downloading an app that it's very rewarding when the app says, congratulations, you've done your 10,000 steps. I get very happy when my Fitbit tells me that. So just think now about the area that's most negatively impacted and just write down 2 or 3 little things that you think you could do. It could just be, I'm just going to WhatsApp a friend now and say, does he want to come for a run with me every Saturday? Just find little changes you could make to improve it. And now let's look at the area that you've really enjoyed. And as Lawrence said earlier, there might be some areas of your life that you've really enjoyed, but if you don't think about it actively, when lockdown lifts, whenever that is, and it's obviously lifting in certain amounts now, but when it does, the day we have a antiviral and we can just carry on as we were before, it will be so easy, believe me, it will be so easy for us to go back to old habits. We think it won't, we think, oh, I won't go back. You will be amazed how much people will revert, because we are very habitual. And if you've had the same habits and the same routine for the last 10 years, then just a few months won't necessarily change that for life. So we want you to consciously stop right now and ask yourself which changes have happened in your life because of lockdown that you want to protect. You want to retain that. So I want to protect the time that I have. You know, I was saying about I've been overly scheduled. So I want to protect not socializing as much. I want to protect that I can do a lot of my business virtually and I won't have to suddenly start commuting just because a client asks me to. And that's where the effort is, because there'll be social pressures. You know, the FOMO, there'll be social pressures coming back. There'll be invitations to go for drinks after work. Maybe you found that you didn't actually, you don't want to go out as much. You're not drinking as much, but then everyone invites you out all the time. How will you protect that when that happens? What can you make non-negotiable? So for example, if you want to eat healthier, can you make a few evenings a non-negotiable night where you're going to cook at home with your partner, you're going to eat something really healthy? If your relationship has benefited because you've spent more quality time together, there might have been pros and cons for your relationship. You also might have been kind of, rubbing up against each other and just there'd been a bit of friction and argument. At the same time, there might have been some wonderful aspects. How do you protect that? Can you say, okay, actually going for a walk every evening after we finish work has been really great for our relationship? Can we schedule that 2 or 3 times a week? It doesn't have to be every day. Can we schedule that we'll have an afternoon every weekend where we're all off our devices and as a family we go cycling, or I go and meet up with my friend in the park? I've loved my park dates. I've loved socializing with people in the park. So what changes have happened to you? And write them down right now and make a commitment to protect them. And mainly the way you're going to protect them is scheduling them. Put them in your calendar. Let your phone work for you by having reminders to continue to make these changes. So now I'm going to hand back to Lawrence to talk to us about the final part to reshaping and responding to this new world and how we use reflection to do that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emily. And just to add to that final point, because once you get the handout, the reflection questions can go quite deep. There's part 2 there. We're looking at our general lifestyle, but I know for myself and a lot of people I've known, they are in the process of making some significant life changes. How many people do you know that actually, done with London, we want a better quality of life? Because that reflective process, the way it's disrupted our day-to-day living is that actually, why can't I just live in the countryside? That's what I love doing. I like being in nature. I don't have to commute as much. So people have taken a much bigger vista of their lives and are beginning to, make those decisions and take action on them. So you can do it at whatever level works for you. And the second point, I just want to sort of mention that for a number of people that maybe it has been quite disruptive, discombobulating. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, but I'd say to people, don't be afraid of that. You've got that power within you and you are more resilient than you realize, and you are able to make these conscious choices. And this is the point about seeing life as an experiment, that this has been one massive experiment, and it's been, just beamed down on us. So if you think about how, as a society, we have been resilient, we've adopted very, very quickly, and you can scale that down to your individual household. So I just want to sort of set up this. We're always responding to challenging circumstances. We evolved to do that. So think now for something specific, because what Emily's just said there is, excuse me, is we don't have to make all the big changes. For some of us, it's about those small changes that can all add up. In sort of sports performance science, they all talked about the 1% that all add up. Well, all the 1% add up to the overall quality of our life. So maybe as you've gone through the process with us, or you've already begun to make changes, what could you experiment with? It's not about the New Year's resolutions, the all or nothing kind of thing. See something where you can commit for a month or so, where you can say, you know what, I'm going to start living differently. Whether it's to do with your exercise, whether it's to do with your relationships, the way you're working, whether you're self-employed or in an organization, and just commit to it. Emily's already given some really good tips about how you can gamify it, how you can track your progress, how you can buddy up, what kind of resources will you need? But see it as something, and this is the really important point, it's not about whether you succeed or fail. It's how you embrace it and what you can learn from it. And this is the whole point of reflection. I think as we get maybe a bit older and wiser, we begin to take a step back. And this, again, reiterating the disruption that it's had, we're kind of out of our automatic habits. So it's shown us that we can take a step back. We're not on automatic pilot all the time, and we can reflect. We don't have to just do something because we've always done it. Or often when I say to my coaching clients, whatever got you to here won't get you to that next level. But from a lifestyle point of view, so maybe, just if those of you who've been participating, think of something. What could you commit to? Whether it's daily, weekly, but over the course of a month, if you were to take a step back at the end of it and say, hey, well, that was easier than I thought. Or, wow, that surprised me, how, challenging that was. But what have you really got to lose by doing that? It is experimental mindset. Another thing I bring up in my coaching when I'm training a lot of the time, be the child, have that curiosity. Remember that mindset. You see it in young children. They're not afraid to fail, to try things. That's what we do. So I don't know if you wanted to say anything on that, Emily, about just having that more open and curious mindset in embracing something. And for a number of you, it could be a number of things, but choose something you can commit to.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that what lockdown's done is it's made us make these changes. And then we've discovered what we do or don't like. That was the whole point of reflecting, is that we didn't know. Some people discovered that they did like working from home. Some people thought they would and then discovered that they didn't like it. Some people discovered that they really liked living in their area because they got to know it better. Some people realized they didn't and they all moved to Devon. So it's by changing something that we actually know if we like it or not. Just think about a child. They don't know what food they like. They don't even know what sports they like doing. And often they think they don't like something. And you try and feed them something and there'll be tears. And then they eat it and they think, oh, they really like it. So it's this we want you to embrace this spirit. You were forced to make changes. And now you've learned from that experiment. Looking forward, now we have a lot more flexibility if you think from a work perspective. So maybe you used to have a job where you had to be in at certain hours, you had to go to the office. Now your company may be offering you a great deal of flexibility. They may be letting you choose your hours or work from home some or all of the time. So now you get to choose, how do you make informed decisions? Well, you try things out. You don't prejudge, you try it out, then you reflect, and then you decide if that's the right thing for you. And we say try and do something for a month because a few days doesn't cut it. I mean, some things you'll really know you don't like it. But even exercise, you might think I don't like running, and then you try running 3 times a week for a month. And by the end of it, you might absolutely love it. So the idea is that you commit to the experiment without prejudging whether you like it or not. Try playing with your routine. You might try for a couple of weeks even different working hours. You might try starting earlier and finishing earlier and realize you love it. Or you might realize you don't like it, you want to start later. Great experiment. You got information at the end of it. So that's why we really want you to don't just think, oh, well, I've reflected on lockdown. For the rest of your life, start experimenting and reflecting and making very conscious choices then about how you live and all the different aspects of the wheel. So Lawrence, before I wrap up, is there anything else you want to add?
The thought that just occurred to me there, a theme I often see is people beating themselves up It's the idea that we give ourselves a hard time when we're trying to create some changes. I think it's just a theme, being kinder to ourselves. I think people have been doing that as a result of lockdown, but as we come out of it, it's that habit we have of just being on the hamster wheel of our own minds, and that critical voice, not doing well enough, I haven't adapted well enough. Or obviously for many people, it's an anxious time. There's those fears about the future. So whatever it is, we can kind of ground ourselves and just slow up a little bit, because the one thing I'm seeing is people are finding themselves jumping straight back on. Slow it up. This is a theme to all my coaching, really. It doesn't matter who it is. All I know is when I'm mentally a bit slower, the world can be crazy around me, but I'm kind of more resilient and able to just tap into my power, my resilience, my clarity of mind. So I make the choices that are good for me. I am not hijacked by the outside. So that was just my little addition at the end there, Emily.
Thanks so much, darling. Okay, so let's just recap then on what we've covered. And then we're going to give you some follow-up resources. We will send afterwards, we'll send a deck with more questions so you can reflect more deeply. You can reach out to us and ask any questions. But let's just reflect ourselves where we've gone through in this webinar. We started with just reflecting. We've been through a very interesting experience. That's one way of putting it. How do we stop and reflect, take this time out to see how it's impacted us, to answer up to ourselves honestly what improved and what actually got worse? And then we talked about how do you reshape that? So once you've identified which areas of your life have been more challenging, how do you just make some small changes to just gradually improve that area and take control again, rather than just saying I'm a victim. Well, I'm not happy now. I'm in this new routine with lockdown and I just won't be happy again until it lifts. Just go, no, actually, what small changes could I make to improve this? In my own life, I had to create some boundaries with my partner about when he could just wander into my office, and having that conversation made a huge difference to my working experience at home. So just little changes that can improve things. So that's on a smaller scale. Then the other question, which is so important, what has improved that you want to protect going forward? And this is true after any big experiment. So when we talk about the experiment now, or if you set experiments in future, stop afterwards and say, you know what, that was really good. How do I keep that in my life? I have a little weekly checklist of things I need to do every week that I have built on through a series of experiments. And these are things that make me feel good and are healthy. And I've built that list by trying things out and finding what worked for me. So work out what has worked for you and how you can protect it. And then the final part is, going forward, we want you to periodically experiment, because you will discover other things about yourself and your experience and your lifestyle, and you can keep reshaping it as you go forward. And also in responding to a changing world, where in some ways we have more flexibility, you'll be able to respond from a position that you understand yourself, that you're informed about your experience, instead of just defaulting to doing what your manager thinks you should do or what society thinks you should do. You can respond from a place where you actually know what is good for you. Now, I would caution that. I would say don't experiment constantly. I know there are these people who are so into personal development that they're constantly hacking and experimenting on themselves all the time. If that's you, great. But try an experiment maybe for a month. As I said, try running 3 times a week, or try a new exercise 3 times a week. And then at the end of it, reflect and decide if you want to keep that going. Maybe you do. Maybe you've just discovered you hate running and you need to try something else. And then give yourself a month off where there's no experiments. You're just living and just enjoying it as it is. And then at the end of that month, stop again and say, okay, what's the new experiment? And make it fun. If you're in a relationship, use your partner as an accountability partner, as I am this week. If you've got children, it can be great to bring them into the experiment. Right, kids, let's all try a new routine. Let's try a new way of getting up in the morning and getting out the door, because that's challenging. It might be with your friends. You might say, right, I think I want to connect with my friends in a new way. Let's do a supper club every Sunday night. Let's do it all together. And if we have to do it remotely, let's find a fun way. We'll share a recipe and we all cook it in advance, and then we see what results we have. And when we can do it in person, we'll pick a house. Involve other people, and experimenting can be a huge amount of fun, but it is incredibly powerful in getting to know yourself and creating a life that really works for you. So we hope you've really enjoyed this just moment to reflect. We will share with you more questions afterwards so you can reflect on a deeper level. We always are happy to receive questions, so you can just email us if you have questions. We'd actually encourage you as well to message us on LinkedIn if you've got questions. And then what we'll do at the end of the week is we'll do a LinkedIn post where we pull all the questions together and we kind of give some group answers if there's some similar themes coming through, because we probably won't have time to answer all of them today. So please connect with us on LinkedIn and message saying, well, how do I handle this? Or what's a good experiment if I want to improve this aspect of my life? We also like to leave you with some other resources. So these are just 3 books that Lawrence and I found really beneficial in our own experience and our own experiments. The Surrender Experiment, a very interesting and powerful book by Michael Singer. The Happiness Project, about making little changes to make yourself happier, a wonderful book. And Atomic Habits, which is also very much about small changes that can have a big impact in your life. Now, as I said, this is part of a series, part of our Conscious Living series, and we will be rerunning our Conscious Careers Workshop shortly on the 24th of August. And the Conscious Careers Workshop is, how do you bring awareness to your career? How do you tap into your own values, strengths, what you enjoy doing to make that next career decision, whether that's leaving your company or whether that's getting promoted or changing what you do slightly? But how do we make those decisions from a grounded, centered place? Again, instead of just doing what we think we should do or what other people tell us to do. It's a slightly longer session, so you have a bit longer to reflect. So if you want to join, we'll send the details afterwards and you can sign up through Eventbrite. So now we're going to hand back to Mel. Thank you so much for hosting us. And Mel's going to share with us some of your brilliant questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily and Lawrence. It was a great presentation, and I'm sure it's very helpful for everyone who's been listening. So we have had quite a few pre-submitted questions come through, but just a reminder, if you do have any questions, put it onto the live chat on the right of your screen. So I'll start off with the first one. How do you see the future uptake of parental leave by men in the new normal?
Well, I'll take that one. I've got male friends. I'd say they'll definitely take it. You know, what I've seen in families, just roles have been mixed together. You know, if you're not going to work so much, I know families have found it really difficult because you're trying to do a full-time demanding job whilst parenting / educating. So it has been disruptive, but I also know that many friends have adopted and adapted, you know, really well to this change in circumstances. So I'd say people will there'll be an uptake of it. I think the dads like being at home. They like, you know, it's been disruptive, but also for companies, you know, it's challenged company thinking. I don't know if there's certain companies out there about, you know, they don't encourage fathers to take that leave or, you know, parental leave, etc. Well, that's all been disrupted.
And if you can work from home, it's so much easier to take it and then look after your children before and after your day. So I'm very grateful for the technology. Thank goodness lockdown happened when we had Zoom. Can you imagine if it happened before we even had the internet? So it's so much easier to flex your childcare around raising children. So I really hope that does encourage more men to take parental leave as well.
Brilliant. The next one is, so many people are suffering from psychological problems in this pandemic situation. How to overcome these problems to lead a healthy life?
Shall I take that one, Lawrence? I mean, first of all, I would say we all have to be very kind to ourselves. One of the reasons we've seen with our own clients a lot of stress is that we're removed from other people. We are meant to live in a tribe. I talk about it in the wellbeing session we did for CMI. We are meant to see people, not just on Zoom, we're meant to see people physically. The brain knows there's a difference between me seeing you all virtually and me being in the same room. So that does create stress and depression. And it's, you know, it's a big topic, but essentially understand that it's very normal if you felt quite down or if your emotions have been up and down. That's a very normal reaction to this. So be kind to yourself. But again, this is where reflecting is really important. Then take a bit of time out. And sometimes, again, if you're having a hard time, it can be easier to reflect with a friend. Have a conversation with them, get them to ask you some questions. Well, what are you struggling with? What's been particularly challenging? What has changed about your life? And maybe how could that have made, you know, created this challenging environment that makes you feel down or challenged in some way? Have a conversation with someone and it will be interesting what comes up. And then you might realize you just need to make a small change that can really improve that area. I gave the example with my partner, but we really were rubbing each other up the wrong way because we were just getting into each other's workspaces. And just by saying, can we just have some office hours where we won't just burst into each other's offices? My stress levels went down so much because I just didn't worry that someone was going to interrupt me when I was in the middle of a call. So definitely have a conversation. And it's always interesting for me, and my clients find the same. When I talk to a friend, I get a different perspective. They ask me some questions. That often helps me get to the root of the issue. So I would encourage people to have a conversation.
Yeah, I like to add two things to that. There are so many different resources out there, support groups, the internet is there for you to engage. And there's fellow sufferers in exactly the same boat as you. So that whole thing about it's good to talk, and I'm sure CMI gets involved in, talking about mental health. Leaders are more and more doing that. Being not afraid to raise this and be honest about where you're at. But also what I would say as well, yes, it's been disruptive to the habitual part of our mind and our personality. So maybe it's an invitation, because there can be a little bit of fear there about the future. But maybe it's an invitation to say, well, actually, I want my life to be different. And there may be some big decisions to make. But what I'm saying is that feeling, whether there's some depression or anxiety or overwhelm, that's you pushing against the edge in possibly some circumstances for some of you about a new way of living, a new way of thinking, whether you're going to change where you live, your job, or actually going maybe on a more spiritual journey. It is an invitation. So the emphasis I always place on people, like, you're more resilient and creative than you realize, looping it back to Emily's point about being kinder to yourself and just reaching out.
Brilliant. And next one is, what are your recommendations for those on the front line? Can you give any?
Emily, well, when we say frontline, it's obviously...
Well, I think we mean like NHS services or people in those frontline roles where they won't have this flexibility. A lot of CMI members will have jobs they could have just done from home. But if you're an anaesthetist or a nurse, you can't Zoom in. And I think this is where it comes back to what Lawrence said at the very beginning about control. One of the major sources of stress for us is when we don't feel in control. So actually, although we've suddenly had to work from home, a lot of us then could exert some other control on our schedule or in some other way. And if you're a frontline worker, you're responding to an emergency, you have no control over when it will end. You can't choose to work from home because you find it stressful. I mean, imagine how stressful to go into a hospital every day. I really feel for people who've done that. And they probably feel there's been all this NHS, for heroes, positioning as heroes. How stressful, because you don't really feel like you can say, oh, I'm not coping with this. I don't want to be a hero. This is incredibly challenging. So I would again say it's about being kind to yourself, trying to control what you can and do what you can to make yourself feel comfortable. Do raise if you're feeling very stressed, and also take holiday. And again, there might have been points where you couldn't as a frontline worker, but there are things that are easing now. And we have this weird idea that we don't want to take holiday unless we can go somewhere far away and exotic. This is for all of you. We need holiday because we need a break from our screens, from our work. Psychologically, we need downtime. So don't wait till lockdowns ease. If you haven't had a holiday since lockdown started, take some time off, have a staycation or take an Airbnb somewhere else. But even if you stay at home, screens off, build in some old school leisure time. And in the blue zones of the world, which I talk a lot about in wellbeing, where people live the longest, they have hardly any screen time. They work short hours. And they regularly just have downtime. They have loads of leisure time. So I'd say anybody, including frontline workers, we need more leisure time.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. It's the Viktor Frankl quote that often comes up about the gap between stimulus and response. So if you find, maybe you're easily getting triggered or emotionally hijacked, or you're shouting at the kids, or basically that colleague at work is just triggering you so much, it's just taking that little bit of a step back, because a number of people have said, I don't feel like myself. So Emily's point there, look, we do have to look after our body as well. We do need to rest. We do need sleep. We need to think about our exercise, our health, our nutrition, and just to slow it up. But notice when you are getting triggered in that way, it is an absolute invitation to slow up and doing what you can within your circumstances to, make that time in your life to just stop, if that's at all possible.
Brilliant. I'll just do one more question. Rather than going straight to a new normal, how do we consider that this might happen in stages, pre and post vaccine?
Well, it's a very good point, because I think for a long time we thought, well, we're in lockdown and then we'll be out of lockdown. And now we might be doing the hokey cokey. We might be in and out. We don't know what it means when they have the vaccine in terms of how we can live. So this is, again, where take it a chunk of period at a time. When my clients were trying to plan too far ahead and getting stressed, I said, just plan for the next 4 weeks. Assume that the status quo you have right now will be the same for the next 4 weeks, and just plan for that. And it's just like how they do it in the military. And then you say, right, in 4 weeks' time, we will regroup, we will reflect, we will ask ourselves questions, and then we'll decide for the next 4 weeks, and just chunk it up, because it's very difficult to make long-term plans right now. So I don't know, Lawrence, if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, absolutely. Look, we live in a VUCA world. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. But we're always dealing with that. So that's my little reminder. You've been adapting to a very rapidly changing society. But my point there, I would add, that's, when we get anxious, we create futures that are never going to happen. That is giving our resilience a way out to the future. So Emily's invitation, just like, you only need to plan so far ahead, because actually looking beyond that doesn't really have a purpose other than to create suffering within ourselves. So, yeah.
And can I just add, Mel, thank you so much for hosting us. We know there's lots more questions that we haven't answered. Please message us on LinkedIn, and we're going to have a wrap up at the end of the week, and we will answer them all in a post there. So, but thank you for the great questions. Really wonderful. Thank you, Mel.
That's okay. Well, that's it for today's session. And thank you to everyone who has joined us. And thank you, Emily and Lawrence, for your insights and expertise. If you are a member of CMI, you can access Management Direct via the link that was shared with you all today in the live chat box. Anyone new to CMI, or those who haven't heard of Management Direct portal, is full of personal and professional development opportunities, including over 400 videos, 10,000 journal articles and more. And do also subscribe to our CMI community via the link again in the live chat box. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day.